morning. As you can see, I got a little bit of a different haberdashery on today. Yeah, I like to call my Johnny Ringo or my bush popper. And that's who we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Johnny Ringo and did he or didn't he? Uh, that question arose from I was doing some normal reading and I fell down a rabbit hole. And I came across Johnny Ringo's autopsy report. A lot of questions. What he's murdered? Did he commit suicide? And I thought in the autopsy report, I found it very interesting that, well, they found a pipe. I'm smoking an Aldo Villani today just because, well, it's like maybe the highest class pipe I got. And Johnny Ringo was kind of a sophisticated guy, even though he didn't have an eighth grade education. He could speak Latin and he could quote Shakespeare. So tip of the haberdashery to Johnny for learning himself a little. And anyhow, to get on with the question of did he or didn't he, did he smoke a pipe as well? Well, I looked and I can't find any pictures. I've Googled and Googled. I can't find any content on it. I will say, however, he liked a good drink. Johnny could drink a little too much and get a little angry, and sometimes he had to pull his pistols because of that, and sometimes he just did it because he was ornery, I think. But we're doing a little bit of, well, we're doing some Hornitos tequila with a lime today. Just a splash of water. I can't do straight tequila. But I like to think of Johnny somewhere in the past, bellied up to a bar at, well, Charleston or even in Tombstone, Safford, Galeyville. And speaking of Galeyville, that's where he was headed when they found his body up against a clump of oak trees. Let's put it that way. And in Safford, he killed his first man. So yeah, and it was all over like somebody wouldn't have a drink with him. So yeah, so in case I get killed today, I'm gonna have a drink. Now on with the show. Johnny was born May 3rd, 1850 in the state of Indiana. Soon after, the family moved to Gallatin, Missouri, and his first cousin Cole Younger and Jesse James lived around that area at the time. His first cousin was Cole Younger, and I didn't do a lot of research on it, but Jesse James was also supposedly related to the Youngers, and then there's the Daltons and the Doolins, but we'll get into that some other time. And, it doesn't say anything about Ringo being related to Jesse James, so I don't know. But, yeah. Anyway, but after they were in Gallatin a while, where a lot of people say that that's where he learned how to really handle a firearm. So after that, they started to head west, and, tragedy took him on the trail a little bit. His father, and here's a question that I'm asking. His father, according to the Liberty Tribune newspaper, it says, "We regret to announce the death of Martin Ringo, Johnny's father, formerly of this city, but more recently of Gallatin, Missouri. He was killed by the accidental discharge of his gun between Fort Laramie and Salt Lake on his way to California. The load entered his eye and came out the top of his head, scattering his brains in all directions." What the They wrote that in the newspaper? They could have just said accidental gunshot wound to the head. I don't know. But the question I'm asking here is, they say suicide can sometimes be in your gene pool, hereditary, or and there's not a lot of eyewitness accounts of the gun discharging, accidentally. So my question is, did his dad maybe weary from the trail and things weren't going great? And trust me, I do not condone suicide or anything like that, but sometimes it happens to people, and it's a sad shame. But anyway, I'm not saying he did, because in all accounts by the newspaper report, it does say that, it was an accidental discharge. So we're going to leave that there. But just remember that for later on down the road. Anyway, after California stint at Cole Younger's, I think, sister's ranch with his family, he ended up in Texas at some point. He killed a man there as well. And I'm going to scratch the Safford thing. He didn't kill his first man, Safford. He killed his first man who wouldn't have a drink with him. That's not the only guy he shot for not having a drink with him. We'll get to that here in a minute. Anyway, he killed his first man. He pulled some robberies and a little cattle thieving. And one of his partners that he was with during a cattle rustling deal and I think an extortion deal of some sort got 99 years. Johnny was acquitted. And in the same town, they elected him constable. Once again, what? And I got to have a drink with that one because that just blows my mind. Anyway, he was town constable. He did some. He wandered around Texas, Austin, it sounds like, and some other places. And he wore his welcome out there, apparently. So he headed to, well, Arizona, and where we start really picking up on his legend. He heads to Tombstone by way of Safford and works his way down there. And anyway, on December 9th, 1879, this is the Safford incident. He shot one Lewis Hancock through the ear for not having a drink with him. Yeah. And apparently in Galeyville, he did the same thing to an unnamed man. Didn't shoot him in the ear, but he shot him dead. So, yeah. Johnny said, let's have a drink. I don't think there was, you didn't ponder that question. You said, yes, sir. But anyway, he was also, while he was in Tombstone, of course, if anybody's seen the movie Tombstone or done a little bit of history, Johnny Ringo's pretty famous. Him and Doc Holliday and the Earps didn't get along. He rode with the cowboy faction, with Curly Bill Brocious and McClourys, Clantons, in Cochise County. Did a lot of rustling on both sides of the border. Just plainly, he was a very smart guy, and I think he was very well-rounded. And they said he was a pretty nice guy until he got to drinking, and apparently he did that quite a bit. So if he was drinking and had guns on him, you might want to go to the tavern down the street. Anyway, so, and he made some enemies too, and we'll get to another one later here called Buckskin Frank Leslie. Anyway, he's kind of around about in Tucson, and at one point he even called Doc Holliday and Wyatt out in the street from across opposing hotels where both factions of the Cowboys and the Earps were staying. And fortunately, there was no gunplay, but and they thought it was very rare because Johnny didn't always call somebody out that was wearing a pistol as well. So I don't know what that says about his character, but I'm thinking if you're around Johnny Ringo, you might want to be carrying your gun. And but no gunfire was exchanged, and Johnny ended up, Johnny, Doc, and Wyatt all got charged $32 for disturbing the peace. So yeah. Tombstone, what a way to get with it. By the way, I'm representing my favorite saloon in Tombstone today, Doc Holliday's. And it's kind of a local place. They've even got a list on the wall of the people that are 86th out of there. So instead of going down to I hate to say it, but the Oriental and the Crystal Palace, or Big Nose Kate's, which didn't even exist back then. If you go to the other places, you're going to find out that they're more touristy than Doc Holliday is. I've had some good times in there. So I highly recommend that. Anyway, let's get on to his death and the item that they found on Johnny. He told one of his friends, Billy Breckenridge, who was a deputy that sided with the Cowboys, and that's another long story, but he told him he was going to Galeyville. This was July 18th, 1882. Johnny was drunk and Breckenridge didn't want him to go. Said it's a long journey, it's hot out today, and it is hot in Tombstone in July. He'd been drinking a lot. Johnny didn't pack many provisions, including water, which might have been a mistake. And he hit the trail. Yeah. And it wasn't long after it. Apparently, Johnny, for some reason, they think he took his boots off and hung him on a saddle horn, and his horse ran off. So, he took his shirt off, apparently, cut it into strips, put it on his feet for the sand, the brush, cacti. Yeah, excuse me. And he journeyed on. And sometime on, that day, a man by the name of John Yost heard a gunshot near Turkey Creek. He went down to investigate. And there was Johnny Ringo in a clump of oak trees. And well, gunshot had went through the temple and out through the top of the head. Piece of the scalp was missing, according to the autopsy report. And a lot of people have speculated that, well, he committed suicide because he'd been in a bad, morose mood for several weeks around Tombstone, and he was saying some things that were out of character for him. And if there was a robbery, a lot of people speculate, and I agree with this. If there was a robbery, Johnny Ringo's not going to let you rob him. And when I read you what he had on him, he's gonna shoot his way. He's either gonna die or you're gonna die. And I don't think one gunshot's not gonna be a robbery. And he had powder burns on him up close, sign of suicide. And that's where I'm getting at with his dad. Maybe this was a hereditary thing. Maybe it was their moods. Maybe it was the drinking. And maybe his father killed himself, and maybe Johnny did as well. And that's what they've ruled it. But there's a lot of naysayers and people that want to make folklore out of, well, the facts. And I think the facts are Johnny was drunk, he lost his horse, and he was 200 yards from water apparently. But and Johnny being from the area, you would know he would be looking for some cottonwoods down in that area or something greener where you can see that stuff and know that there's some sort of water around there. And he didn't really do that. So did he really not want water, or did he just give up? And apparently the only thing he had to drink was whiskey. So yeah. And with that, I'll have a drink. I know this video is getting a little long. I'm gonna wind it down and get to my point here in a second. Anyway, there was also talk that Wyatt Earp had come back from California to kill him. And well, Wyatt Earp was 50 miles away, they said at the time. So how did that work? And Doc Holliday was about the same distance up north in Colorado, and he was even in court that day. So and they blamed Doc as well. And the movie Tombstone, it's bullshit. At least that scene is. There's some truth in some of the stuff, but anyway. And they said there was five bullets in his gun, which, the single shot. But also you got to remember another thing. Here's the thing where it gets a little foggy. Back in the day, those guys usually didn't carry 6 shots in their 6-shooter. Afraid of accidental discharge. So their hammer was usually resting on an empty chamber. So that's the only question. If he shot himself, and Johnny was a well-known pistolaire, he's not probably carrying 6 shots. He's carrying 5, but he still has 5 bullets. So did somebody shoot him? Did this guy shoot him? I don't know, but I don't think anybody's just going to walk up to Johnny Ringo and pop him in the head. Especially when, according to what the autopsy found on him, he was wearing a cartridge belt, which was upside down, mind you, but it was full of shells. And he had 2 of those. He had one on his gun belt, and then he had a separate cartridge belt. But the cartridge belt was upside down. And Johnny was pretty proud of his pistolero skills, so yeah, I think that's just due to drunkenness. Something happened. He put it on upside down. Maybe when he took his shirt off, he had to take his gun belt off. I'm not sure. Anyway, on to what it was found on. He had an American pocket watch with a silver chain, $2.60 in money, 6 pistol cartridges alone in his pocket, not to mention this. So if somebody's trying to rob him, Johnny's loading up. He's loaded for bear. He's got 5 shirt studs, diamond shirt studs. He's carrying a pocket knife, a lot of stuff in his pockets. He's carrying a comb, and he's carrying matches. 1 piece of small tobacco, and well, here's where we get to it. A pipe. Yeah. And I would love to know if Johnny Ringo smoked a pipe. Obviously he did. I would love to know if Johnny Ringo offed himself or someone did it for him. But I think that's probably lost of time. Research some of it. It's pretty interesting. There's a lot of hearsay and who-say, and it's really good. But I thought it was interesting he smoked a pipe because, honestly, Johnny Ringo was pretty sophisticated. So I would figure he would maybe smoke some of the small cigars that were really popular at the time because, and honestly, cowboys and outlaws, the whole cigarette thing, they weren't big into that. They thought it was kind of, girlish, feminine. It wasn't until later, early 1900s, that cowboys actually started smoking cigarettes, from what I've heard. So pretty interesting fact there. So when you see them smoking in the movies and stuff, a lot of times they should either be smoking a pipe and or a cigar, for the time period. But the pipe, I'd like to think that Johnny, probably had a nice pipe on him. It doesn't really say, but anyway, I just thought that was a cool piece of pipe history, what they found on Johnny Ringo's body. Caught my attention, thought I'd share it. With that, I'm going to bid you a tip of the haberdashery and an hasta luego, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.